Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this video I'm going to make up for a glaring omission in my World War II content, and that is I've yet to do a video focusing solely on the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. Now, I was very kindly sent by a fan of my books this wonderful Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife, and it was issued to him while serving in the Royal Logistics Corps, the RLC, or known as a Loggie. And he did the commando course, and this is what he was issued, maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s, I'm not quite sure. In any instance, we'll be using this model for the demonstration today. I don't want to go through too much of the history and the origination. There are so many videos on there about how this came to be, from different blades that they use in the Shanghai Municipal Police, blah, 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 blah. There's lots of stuff out there, and there's many people much nerdier than I am in the construction, make, and minor variances of the knife. But for me, in the types of videos I make, it's a fucking knife and it's designed to stab. So we're going to look at how people historically used and trained with the knife. We're going to take a historic look at what the knife was used for, how it was trained, how it was deployed. Now, first thing you notice when you pull this out is this is a stabbing orientated weapon. Whilst it's got cutting edges, it wants to go through. Anyone that picks up a weapon, you get a feel for what it was designed to do, what it was born to do. You pick up a kukri, you know it wants to chop. You pick up one of these, you know it wants to stab. Why would I use this? Well, if I was issued this, I'm probably going to be a commando, I'm probably going to be in the SOE, or I might be in any one of a number of irregular warfare style units. And the primary reason why I would have this specific type of knife is sentry removal. Removal of people very quietly and very quickly. To do that in a way that causes minimum fuss and maximum damage once you've infiltrated an environment. So it's primarily a weapon of ambush. Now, it's not to say you can't use this once the fight is on, once the conflict is on, as an open fighting knife. It's called the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. But in reality, knife fighting is very, very, very rare. The act of using the knife once deployed in any kind of combative sense, it's relatively infrequent. It's not impossible, but it's relatively infrequent to have a blade-on-blade conflict. It's a lot more common to have this as a weapon of surprise. But we'll go through a number of ways in which the blade was used, the more common and the less common. So let's start with the less common. So let's assume that the blade is out. We are fighting with the blade against an active and aware opponent. So, key features. There's lots of ways to grip it, and it's a very personalised thing. You need to do it in the most comfortable way for you. Comfort is a priority, and lots of different historical sources look at this in lots of different ways. My preferred method, and a very common historical method, is to use the forefinger and the thumb, and to apply this style pinch grip, and then I apply a sabre style pressure here, so the thumb against the back edge of this guard. Other people tend to have it folded just over, just so. It's relatively uncommon to have a hammer grip. This gives little blade control. So having the thumb here in this pinch grip, all of the control comes from the finger and the thumb. Now, an important reason why you would do this is that you've got good edge alignment. Where your foreknuckles are is where your blade is. So you know precisely the cutting edge of your weapon. You do not want to be slapping people with the flat of this blade. If you are cutting with it, you want to make sure that you're using the edge appropriately. Another thing is, when you are cutting with this, it's important to remember that this weapon doesn't have the heft or weight to chop. It's not a cleaver, it's not going to chop. So when the weapon comes against flesh or comes against clothing, it's not this action that causes the cut. It's the slice, it's the drawing back of the blade which causes the trauma, which opens things up. So whilst you will get some top-level trauma like so, in reality, if it's not thrusting, it's slicing, it's coming back, which causes the cuts to happen. So it's just another important thing. Don't chop with it. It's not a cleaver. It won't have enough weight to do much damage, but it can slice beautifully. And that means the return pull, when it touches, it pulls. That pull is very, very, very important. Being able to touch and pull and drag. Okay, so let's look at how this was used. Now, with all things World War II combatives, a crouched position is most common. So you see people going around with Sten and Tommy guns from a crouched position. You see one-handed kind of instinctive combat shooting from a crouched position. You see unarmed combatives from a crouched position. And it's no different from the knife. Keeping your balance, keeping your feet solid on the ground, not much attention is paid to footwork. If you feel balanced, if you feel on balance, if you feel athletically that you can move forwards, back, left, right, that's good enough. There's not a huge amount of time to train in nuanced fencing style footwork. So let's look at this from the position that the knife is already drawn and the combat is engaged. Now, typically you would have the knife hand forward. Again, that's not a hard and fast rule. You can, sometimes it's beneficial to have the knife in the rear hand, especially if there are multiple opponents. But in this instance, let's just take a basic crouched fighting stance. My rear hand is ready to strike, to grapple, to move, to fend, and my knife hand is ready here. Now, an important thing about using the Fairbairn Sykes knife in open is that typically you and the knife should always be moving. If the knife is drawn, you're not staying there as a static threat. You and the knife are always looking for the opportunity to finish that confrontation, to finish that fight. So the knife is always moving and you are typically always moving. But it makes for a very distracting video, so I will stop myself. Like I mentioned, we've got that thumb and forefinger grip. We grip it tightly, we don't clasp it, we're not tensing our arms, but we've got a good degree of pressure, especially here on the knife. Importantly, when we cut or when we slice, on the way in, we can have our knuckles to the ground. On the way out, our palm to the ground. So knuckles, palm, knuckles, palm, knuckles, palm. And quite simply, we want to make sure that we're moving that knife with the edge aligned, so parallel to the ground. We're always cutting like so, like so, like so, if we can help it. Now when the knife is out, you are moving, the knife is always moving, and your primary initial targets are the hands and the face, but predominantly the eyes of the opponent. Now why is that? Typically hands deliver weapons. The hand itself can be a weapon, it can grab, it can hit, it can have incidental weapons, it can have chairs, it can have spades, it can have all sorts of stuff. It can have blades, it can have sticks, it can have firearms. The hands are always going to have something dangerous in them, or try and get something dangerous in them. So once it's drawn, and if we're at, say, a medium fighting range, we want to make sure that we're cutting at those hands, stopping those hands being able to access weapons, or if the hand has already accessed the weapon, making sure that we slice these up. Any trauma to the hand tends to open the hand up, which means the weapon is dropped. So it's good practice whether they're armed or not. If you're using the knife, hands are important. And also people tend to have their hands foremost when they're threatened. When people are threatened by a bladed object, they don't tend to put their hands behind their back. Defensive wounds happen all the time. People will use their hands to defend. So you are taking out the closest possible object, which is the hands. Another thing you want to be going for is the face. So cutting across the eyes, either way. I always go for the eyes because it creates the most visceral reaction. It makes people move and react. Sharpened metal going towards the eyes will make you shift. It will make you move. So it's very, very important. So if you imagine the fight's on and we're in this range, you're cutting towards the hands, in and out. You can also go vertically down if you wish. But again, remember the drag is important. It's much more common to go left, right. This is not unknown, coming off diagonals or verticals, but you notice that there is always a definite slice. Contact, slice. Contact, slice. Contact, slice. So the knife is always moving and cutting and advancing. You are advancing. You are not defensive in any way. You are crouched and you are advancing. And you are cutting to the hands and to the face. The reason you be doing this, however, you want him to be disarmed, if possible. You want him to be off balance, if possible, and that's why you're going towards the eyes, making him move back. But your final blow is naturally going to be a thrust. The thing that ends the encounter is typically the thrust. So some of the major principles of open usage of that blade is to cut at the hands and face, be ready to move, any one position, get used to and comfortable moving the blade, slicing the hands, slicing the face, until you can find an opportunity to deliver a lunge, and the lunge delivered like so, not like so. So this allows it to fit neatly between any protecting ribs and come out smoothly. And with a lunge, these can be relatively long range. So you can bend your front knee, and you can extend like so. Boom, boom. And you'll be surprised at the distance you can cover on any one lunge. You can go quite far. So you're cutting hands, you are cutting face, you're having good edge alignment, you are moving your feet in many directions, you're staying on balance. Hands, face, lunge. Now, what are some of the key targets? Well, key targets are broken down as follows. So, cutting here, along the arterial paths of the wrist, the inner elbow, again, arterial paths, against the carotid, so against the side of the neck, in the subclavian, so the artery that comes just by the collarbone, into the heart itself, so an aortal stab, or indeed to the centre of the mass above the navel, so a stomach shot. So those are the kind of the 6 striking or slicing areas that are primary. Wrist, elbow, throat, subclavian, heart, centre of mass, navel area. So that's the knife in open conflict when you are moving. Another important thing to think about is that often there are multiple opponents. So you may wish to use circular sweeps of the knife to keep people at bay once you've dealt with this person. So for example, a really simple drill would be you've nailed this lunge here, other people will see the opportunity to attack, so you withdraw and make a bigger circle here, a large whipping motion. And you see Fairbairn in his films go from cuts, so using that edge alignment, using the hands, eyes, lunge, move. And you can do nearly a 360 turn, making sure that you've got that right edge alignment to move people out of the way or to damage any incoming faces, hands, or whatever. Those larger circular sweeps are as important as these small hand-eye cuts and slices. That's an important thing to think about. So you've got the knife, it's always on balance. You're told to roll the knife, so get used to having the knife, moving it between your hands, get comfortable with how it works, get comfortable how it feels. Each knife feels very, very different, so get used to manipulating it. Get used to having good control of it. Find a grip that suits you best. Find a stance that suits you best. And get used to cuts and slices that are aggressive, that are athletic. You are moving. The knife is always moving. This is non-stop pressure on the hands, on the face, until such a time, boom, you can get that solid lunge in there. Very, very, very important. So you've got that open usage of the knife, but that would be relatively rare. It'd be very uncommon, or relatively uncommon, for you to have to use the knife in such an open way. Another important aspect is being able to draw the knife in a way which makes it an immediate threat. Now, you may decide to have the knife, the paras had the knife on the leg. Other people have had the knife in various belt configurations, chest configurations, back configurations. You name it, there are different preferences and ways in which you would overtly, on the outside, or covertly, on the inside, have a blade like this. But in either instance, you need to get used to, whatever your favourite position is, pulling the weapon and making sure it's on point very, very quickly. So if I was to have this in a leg holster, let's just have it here, leg sheath, sorry, immediately the knife is on point. So I draw, immediately the dangerous bit is pointing towards the adversary. If this was on, say, a lengthways waist sheath, again, you draw, immediately it's on. It doesn't need to come out, you don't need to go into any stance. As soon as this comes out, it needs to be ready to go. It needs to be immediately ready to go. So it's very important to get used to drills wherever you carry it. You can practice it from within a sleeve, in a jacket, on a belt rig, on a leg rig, whatever you've got. draw and have this ready to go. And only if you've got the space would you want to move into anything else. So you draw and have it immediately out. Draw and have it immediately out. These are key things to bear in mind. Other things to bear in mind is the ancillary parts of the weapon. So for example, the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife doesn't have a great deal of pommel, but it will cause significant injury if you deploy it. So again, with this you've essentially got an enhanced hammer fist. You could be coming down on the collarbone, you could be coming in or out to the jaw. You might decide to take this straight into the chin, but again, you would only be deploying this if you wanted a less than lethal solution, or if the range made anything else more prohibitive. Bang! You would use this to make space to use the weapon. But unlike the smash it, which has a larger pommel, can cause more damage, this is a small thing. It's a very, very small, subtle pommel. So whilst you can definitely use it against the eye, against the bonier parts of the face and the chest, against the hands, in reality, this is primarily a slice and thrust tool. But just taking myself off track, get used to being able to draw it from many different positions, overtly and covertly, and having it on point. Let's bring us to the main usage of the knife. Main usage of the knife is sentry removal, and there are a couple of key ways in which this was done. So, an initial way would be to creep in low, to grab the face over the mouth, draw into your person, thrust in through the throat, and cut out. Nice and simple. So you're striking this in. You're not just covering, you're striking this in, covering the mouth and nose, in, cut out. One method. Another method is to bring the hand in, and you see here, so the palm is out, and then going in, and then going out. So you've got hand over mouth, draw, in, or you've got this particular method here. This method here obviously muffles sound very, very well. Does muffle sound very, very well, but you don't have much control over the throat. Here, I've got good control over the throat. I've got him solidly by the neck as if I were to do a strangle, but noises can be made. But either way, you would finish the job very, very, very quickly. You also see instances of the knife being used against the back, and a primary target, which was explained for this, is the kidneys. So again, you would take the hand over mouth method, and you would go into the kidney here. Into the kidney, remove, into the neck, remove. These are just some of the simple ways in which the knife was deployed. It needn't be rocket science. You know, you can spend a lot of time getting too into how this would work, but in reality, people that were learning this stuff had a very limited time frame. So, cover the mouth, into the neck and out, wrap the head, into the neck and out, or either of those, into the kidney, remove, into the neck and out. Simple sentry removal, and that is primarily the knife's task. Outside of that, I'm just going to lift the camera up just a little bit for you. Outside of that, it's also to remember that the knife isn't really the weapon. You are the weapon in this instance. So, you know, we talk about the knife always moving. You always moving. Being aware of how that knife will be cutting, being aware of the edge alignment. Getting to a point where the finishing techniques, which are typically thrusts, can be readily and rapidly deployed. You're doing it on the thrust often because there will be a threat coming back. You want this in, somewhere lethal, and out, without you sticking around. It's a bit like a boxer admiring his own work. If you've just landed a killer hook, you don't want to stick around waiting for the effect of that because you might eat one too. So you want to make sure, bang, you're moving off. That could be moving in or moving out, but you want to be doing something after that lunge is delivered. And bear in mind, this is primarily an arterial-based platform, so slicing wrist, an elbow, carotid, subclavian, into thrust to the heart, thrust to the stomach. These are the kind of key finishers, the key openers on making sure that you can cut to the hands and to the face, predominantly the eyes. as I mentioned. But again, I'm going off track. It's been a while since I've made one of these videos. The important thing to remember is the system comes together. Your knowledge of gutter fighting in this instance will be the thing that allows this to be very effective. So for example, you might go for a backhanded slash to the eyes. As the opponent, who might have moved out of the way, comes in, you might have to feed in something else, such as a chin jab or a tiger claw, to allow you to finish the job. So get used to building in and blending in with your other techniques. So you might go for an inner forehand slice to the hand. You might have missed that technique, so you may tiger claw, bring out again, to bring in again. Yep. You may get to an impasse. You might get so close here that you need to knee to the groin, and you might need to jam to the face. Boom, boom, to give you enough space to do this technique. So being able to kick, moving from here, boot the side of the knee, cut at the eyes, cut at the throat. So side kick, slash, side kick, slash. If you're very, very close, your knees, your headbutts, your gouges are all very important. At the mid-range, being able to blend in different aspects of your technique. So chin jab up to extend, and then taking this into the target. So there's lots of ways you can build in your gutter fighting. If you're attacked from the left-hand side, you might decide to do an edge of hand blow whoosh, to buy you the space necessary to take this weapon in. Whoosh. So being able to use the different gutter fighting techniques, primarily your tiger claws, your chin jabs, your edge of hand blows, your kicks, your knees, these are all very, very important. You also see Fairbairn contract the head, bend the body over, and then take in a shot like this, almost prison shank style. So whatever it gets, it could get the femoral artery, could end up coming up straight up the centre into the navel, you could get the heart, liver, spleen, whatever, but you are ballistically bringing in and striking up. You see this in his OSS videos. So this particular approach can also happen when you're at close range. You might have drawn, brought him under, and dug this in. But primarily, this is a sensory removal tool. So like we talked about, over the mouth, around the neck, or into the kidney. These are primary ways in which the weapon is used. Secondary ways in which the weapon is used are cutting hands, eyes, and then finishing with robust thrusts to places that finish the job. But it's not rocket science. In about 90 minutes, 2 hours, you can learn everything you need to really know about using a Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. After that point, in reality, it's just solidifying those drills, getting used to doing it on an even terrain, in the darkness, with gear on, understanding all those different ramifications, with the person aware, semi-aware, completely unaware, and also building in the rest of your gutter fighting repertoire to make this blend and flow. You might miss, finger jab to the eyes, boot kick to the groin, finish the job. For example, there's lots of ways you can build in your unarmed platforms with your knife platform because they move in the same way. If you think about it, backhanded use of the knife works beautifully in the same way that a reverse edge of hand blow works. Anything that comes on a thrusting line here is the exact same as it would be for a tiger claw, like so. Anything close range which comes up, stabbing up into the opponent, is exactly the same dynamic as a chin jab. So get used to feeling the interplay between the unarmed and the bladed stuff. You also see Fairbairn, although he discourages it, we also see how he uses an ice pick style grip, but the principles are much the same. But the preferred method is sensory elimination, or the weapon is drawn, making sure that we've got very good edge alignment, cuts which lead to thrusts. These are primary ways in which the weapon is used, but the most neglected skill of all is being able to deploy this in a rapid way where the weapon is ready. So often you won't have much time, or you wouldn't have had much time to pre-draw this weapon. So you need to be able to make it operable from the off, from whichever carrying platform you enjoy. So those are some of the ways in which the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife was used. There's a lot more material you could cover, you could go a lot more in depth, and there's some great material out there. Absolutely go watch the OSS films with Fairbairn himself. I've tried to make it clear for you guys. There's lots of different dubbed versions or poorer quality, so hopefully this gives you a bit of a flavour, a bit of a taster. Go out there, practice with these, don't just collect them, don't just put them in a dusty drawer somewhere. Take them out for a bit, get used to moving, being athletic with it, cutting, thrusting, slicing, integrating your unarmed skills, all of which are a great way to honour the use and the principles and the great tool which is the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. Hope you found that interesting. Give it a play.